According to the Lonely Planet for the Western Balkans, there are 4 museums that are worth checking out in Belgrade. I'm a little excited for these because I'll tell you one of my favorite places in Belgrade, St. Sava's Temple, does not have a star on it in the book, and I think it deserves one. But all 4 of these museums do, so they should be pretty incredible. We're going to start out with the Museum of Yugoslavia, and then we're going to be hitting up the National Museum, the Museum of Contemporary Art, and the Nikola Tesla Museum. My understanding is that the Museum of Yugoslavia is like a history museum. That's why I'm going to start there, because that sounds a lot more like my jam. The next 2, the National Museum and the Museum of Contemporary Art, are art museums, of course. Art's not like super my jam, but I do enjoy it, so it's going to be fun to see what's going on around there. And the last one, the Nikola Tesla Museum, should be super cool. I think it's kind of like part the history of Nikola Tesla and his life, and mostly science museum, which will be super fun. You can see here as I make my way towards the Museum of Yugoslavia, I'm walking through Hyde Park here in Belgrade. It's one of the bigger green spaces, at least on this end of the city, and it's a really pretty and cool place. But the purpose of today's museums, so let's go check it out. So here we are at the Museum of Yugoslavia. You can see it behind me. I'm honestly really excited to check this out, and I hope there's a lot about what life was like under the state of Yugoslavia. I've now been to Russia several times. I've lived in a post-Soviet state. I've traveled all over the Western Balkans, and I've lived in Serbia, which is obviously the country containing the capital of what was Yugoslavia. And it's a common misconception in the West that we think of all communism as being rather Soviet, but it was definitely not. In Russia, you do often get the sentiment of kind of a nostalgia looking back towards the Soviet years. But in the other post-Soviet states, you definitely do not get a nostalgia for it. There was a feeling of oppression and a lack of freedom, and they remember it well. But other communist states were very different than this. And one example I can give is that in Yugoslavia, religion was very, very common. That's part of why Orthodoxy and Islam in different regions are still very common here, and Catholicism as well. So whereas we Americans think of communism as being ruled by the sentiment of religion is the opiate of the masses, that was definitely not the case here. It's a very different type of communism, and from what I gather when I talk to people, there was quite a bit of freedom. As a result, Yugoslavian music was very much alive. There was a whole new wave movement, I mean, very much like in the Western states. People had the ability to travel to the West. I've talked to some people who took their families to London during the Yugoslav era. Well, for someone living in the Soviet era, this would have been very, very difficult to do. And all of this is just to say that I'm really excited to see what we experience in here. I think these will be some unique stories that we haven't heard in the West. I've also heard this museum centers a lot around the life and power of Joseph Tito. He's a fascinating character to me as well. One of the things you may not know is that where we think of the French resistance under the Nazi years, well, here in the Balkans, there was a similar type of resistance. Of course, it wasn't quite as active, but they were called the partisans, and Joseph Tito was a partisan. So he came up kind of in his political career as a resistance fighter against the Nazis. And then, of course, he came to power over the top of the Yugoslav communist state, and his sentiment, everything that I see in the propaganda and when people talk about him, is his sentiment was one of unity, which is super, super cool. It's something, again, that we as Americans, I think, take for granted. Is like if one state is in dire need and something happens, we just take it for granted. Like, of course we send assistance. And the same thing happens in the EU, but there's always questions about it. If this other state needs assistance and we're sending money, at what point do we question how much money we can send? At what point does it actually put a significant dent in our economy and we have to take care of our people? Because while we're both EU members, they're a separate people group, a separate state, a separate nation. Well, in Yugoslavia, my understanding is that the general sentiment was one of unity and that these are our people and we all stand together. Very cool sentiment. We can see, of course, in the war in the 90s that it hit its limitations and there was still this underlying difficulty with the otherness of people. But regardless, Tito's message of unity is powerful and cool. So let's go check it out and see what we find in this museum. I'm really excited to learn some new things. This first hall in the museum is quite fascinating. One side is dedicated entirely to workers' rights and the labor movement here under Yugoslavia, but the other side showcases all of these gifts that were given to Joseph Tito from different nations of the world. And they are a super fascinating collection of nations. You may not know, he actually established like the group of nations that never took a side in the Cold War, so they never allied with the Soviets or with the West. And these collection of gifts are super fascinating. From places all over the world, obviously from places like Japan. This is Bolivia. A warrior's headdress, gift from Ethiopia from Haile Selassie himself to Joseph Tito. Gifts from Myanmar and Mandalay. Very fancy backgammon set. super interesting and very cool. A lot of the Balkan states, of course, are represented here, but a lot of states in Africa, East Asia, really all over the world. And it just shows this was a very different association of nations. Of course, also in Europe, like Finland, a gift from the USSR. From Algeria. It does seem like this sentiment kind of carries today. Like Serbia is still a nation that kind of rides the line between the East and West, just tries to make sure everybody is happy, so it has open trade with the entire world. Interesting place. The next hall again has all kinds of publications about the workers' movement on one side, but the other side begins with this collection of hunting gear. Some of it very cool and super interesting. A set of hunting rifles, hunting binoculars, and the hunting outfit used by Joseph Tito himself. It's a very interesting story told in pictures. It's a story we often don't talk about much in the West, the story of industrialization. We often talk about Henry Ford and how it created wealth for so many people. But here we see the workers' side of the story, starting out as farmers until industrialization moves in and there's pollution, so they're not able to continue with the lives they've had. We see depictions of the wealthy getting wealthier and the poor not necessarily getting poorer, but certainly working less idyllic jobs. The museum also tells the story of the end of the World War II and the communist revolution here, and how the state of Yugoslavia was established. Then there's a whole section showing some of the fruit of globalization and industrialization. Of course, the automotive producer was one of the largest employers in all of Yugoslavia, which makes sense. We still see a lot of Yugo cars around today. Without industrialization, a lot of these products would have never been invented or been able to create it en masse. Of course, in the West, we're nostalgic for a lot of these technologies as well, so it makes sense that people have nostalgia for this type of era. And I'm sure some look back on communism very favorably. Others just love this era. It makes total sense to me. Overall, I would say the Museum of Artifacts is not that large, but it is very interesting. I was hoping to learn more about what actual, the commoner's life was like under Yugoslavia. There are a lot of interesting, propaganda and publications, but not a lot of, stories, not a model apartment of what someone's place might look like. I was kind of hoping to see stuff like that. But there is this very cool sculpture park just outside as well. There's also, a house of flowers, and I know Tito's mausoleum is also here, so I'm excited to go see those things. We'll see if we can continue learning a few new things. It seems that the House of Flowers is Tito's mausoleum. It does tell the story of his life and breaks it into different themes and periods. It's a very interesting spot to sit and read for a bit. I did not know he grew up as a locksmith, so it makes sense through that time period that he would have become affiliated with the socialists. But of course, also a freedom fighter through World War II. Personally, I'm super glad that I had the time to come and be able to see this today. The museum is well named. It's not really a museum to the people of Yugoslavia or to what life was like. It's to the state of Yugoslavia itself throughout its different periods, different social movements, different pieces of history, and of course the leader Tito as well, especially because his mausoleum is right here. Personally, I would tell the writers of Lonely Planet, if you're going to put a star on museums like this, you should put a star as well on St. Sava's Temple. But it is a very cool museum. If you're interested in checking out a history museum, I think this is well worth a couple hours of your time. But we got 3 more museums to go check out. So next, let's head down to the National Museum right off of Republic Square. All right, the second stop on our little Belgrade museum tour is the National Museum, right there, Narodni Muzej. It's right next to the horse. Just go right behind it, and that beautiful, beautiful building back there. And we're gonna see, all I've really heard about it is that it's a big art museum. There's a lot of international art as well as Serbian art. I think there's even a legit Egyptian mummy in there, so let's go check it out. Unfortunately, I was told I cannot bring my camera in with me. It was interesting. There was a little bit of an argument at the door. One of the guys thought it was totally fine, and another guy made me leave it at the coat check. So I'll just be narrating this as I show pictures. It is well worth an hour or two. Before moving to Serbia, I feel like I read all the time about Stone Age and Neanderthal excavation sites in Croatia, but I didn't realize how common it is here in Serbia as well. The bottom floor of the National Museum is dedicated to like the archaeological sites and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things to see around that theme. A ton of stone tools and stone jewelry from different excavation sites around the country. Really interesting. Some amber jewelry, really beautiful. Moving forward in time, of course, this area was adjacent to the Greek Empire. So there's a lot of like pottery and jewelry that to me looks very early Greek. They have some examples of columns and architecture and mosaics that to me seem to span the time from the Greeks into the Romans. Of course, the Eastern Roman Empire was here for centuries, so that makes total sense. And some golden jewelry and other things as well. Super cool. But the coolest part, by far, of the bottom floor is they have these 2 vaults with like the history of coinage in this area. And of course, the coinage is super fascinating. It's broken down not just into eras, but also into like the different times of the leaders that presided. And it's cool because you can see like times of wealth when the coins were larger and times when the empire was having more hardship. And so the coins were really small. Of course, there was already civilization here before money was invented. So it spans the time when money was like a modern innovation, and different Roman empires were kind of playing around with monetary policy and how does this work. As an economist, super fascinating. I loved it. And some of the coinage and history here is not only Roman, but also Serbian. So they show some of the different dynasties that resided over Serbia and what the coinage looked like in those times. It's really, really interesting. I'm surprised to say this was actually one of the highlights of the museum for me. Moving to the second floor, there are kind of 2 different sections, and the really interesting one to me is like the medieval art in this area. And of course, through all of the Middle Ages, this area was very, very Christian. So a lot of it is Christian-centric, and that's probably a lot of why it's so interesting to me. They have an example of an early Bible. It's really beautiful. A bunch of mosaics that are truly incredible. The art and the metalwork and the woodwork are all so gorgeous. Some architectural pieces as well. This door was one of my favorite pieces in the entire museum. The woodwork is just amazing, and the fact that the color is still so vibrant after so many centuries is just wonderful. The other side of the second floor had like some more contemporary European and Balkan art, and it's nice, but it's just not my thing. Especially by comparison, it really is stark. The first thing you see when you reach the third floor is a legit Egyptian mummy. It's really beautiful the way they've displayed it, super fascinating to see. The third floor is also kind of separated into 2 different sections. One section is just kind of more contemporary, I guess moving from the Middle Ages into the Romantic era, but like pan-European art, and some of it is really beautiful. Personally, my favorite part was actually the frames on some of these beautiful paintings. Some of the Balkan art from the Romantic period is really heartbreaking, but also truly gorgeous. It's some of the things I really love about this area, highlighting like these idyllic landscapes, beautiful, beautiful monasteries that are kind of like fortress monasteries. This is the burning of St. Sava's remains, it's a really heavy, interesting, important piece of Serbian history. There's some really incredible Impressionist art. There's even a Monet and a Van Gogh. This sculpture is one of the most beautiful pieces in the museum. And then the other side of the third floor is modern, kind of like Yugoslavian period art. I was impressed. Some of these people are truly masters of the Impressionist style. Really, really beautiful art to see, especially when you see the mastery of the thickness of this oil paint and brush strokes. For some reason, this type of art is just so compelling to me. The other pieces of art within the Yugoslav period that really stuck with me are these kind of Art Deco style. I love how the sharp lines just kind of really play with light and they get really emotional. It's just a beautiful style. The museum building itself, of course, is also quite gorgeous. It's hard to beat marble staircases like this. Well, art museums have never really been my jam, and I actually really enjoyed that. I think it's well worth a few hours. But next we're headed to the Museum of Contemporary Art. And I never knew it before I went to MoMA in New York, but that's much more my jam when it comes down to art. So let's go see what that's about. All right, Museum of Contemporary Art. I'm pretty stoked to check it out. It's in the middle of a sculpture park, in the middle of what has got to be the biggest park in Belgrade. It is huge. Over on the New Belgrade side of the river, I think also on the higher floors we might have a really incredible view over to Kalemegdan. And after what we saw on the top floor of the National Museum, I'm really excited. That contemporary Yugoslavian art, like the Impressionist painters and the Art Deco style stuff, was so cool. So let's go find out if I'm allowed to bring my camera in and if we can learn some new stuff. So you buy tickets and you immediately head to the second floor and you run into this exhibit, which is like fine and interesting. I personally have never really understood this like super simple modern art. The only artist like this that ever made sense to me was Rothko, and it didn't make sense until I moved to Latvia, knowing that he's a Latvian artist. And there's times when standing on the beach in Latvia, the whole world looks like three lines. It's like sand, sea, sky. But other than that, this stuff has just never really clicked with me. Like, sure, it's pretty, it's cool, but it's just not really my thing. The main exhibition going on right now is a David Hockney, and I've known for a while a lot of David Hockney I just don't really get into. Maybe it's just because I really love color so much. This was interesting. It's like Hockney's response or his take on a painting from Pablo Picasso's Blue Period. This was really cool. So Hockney has this new series that's like work on an iPad, I think. The colors are vibrant and it is really cool. I really like this, especially this greenery with the rain. Beautiful. And there was like this live evolving section that was really, really cool to stand and watch for a bit. A lot of the museum has these big, spacious areas full of sculpture. These modern sculptures are cool, but again, they're just like not really super my thing. For some reason, I did really like this. It's interesting. It has something to do with the light. I just like it. And then on the top floor, there's a bunch of these like super geometric sculptures. Honestly, as a math teacher, it really could have been a student's art project from our geometric solids unit. But I really like this one. I'm not sure why, but it's super cool. Honestly, this view of Kalemegdan is the highlight of the museum in my book. I'd rather not be critical, but I definitely have to be honest, and I have to say I found very little of that compelling. Personally, if I was going to spend a couple hours over here on this side of the river, I would much rather walk around Zemun or this park. For my money, the National Museum, extremely worth it. Contemporary Art Museum, I mean, if contemporary art's super your jam, maybe you're gonna love it. It's a lot of sculpture. I wouldn't say it's like not interesting, but I would say it's totally incomparable with the contemporary art museums in the really big cities. Like New York and Madrid have amazing contemporary art museums. I'm a little sad to say it, but for my money, I would not make the trip over to this side of the city just for the contemporary art museum. If you're coming over here for the first time, go to Zemun. But today we got one more museum to go hit up, and I'm really excited for the Nikola Tesla Museum. Let's go see it. Alright people, we've made it to the Nikola Tesla Museum. It's in this beautiful but somewhat unassuming building right behind me. And I am really excited about this one. This is one of the two that I was super excited about in the beginning of this video. Being a museum dedicated to one of the great inventors, scientists, engineers of the last couple hundred years, I expect it'll be kind of part science museum and part history of Nikola Tesla himself. Should be super fun and interesting. Hopefully they have some interactive stuff. Let's go see what we find out. This is one of the coolest things to see in the museum. It is Nikola Tesla's urn, and his ashes are kept in a sphere because he thought it was like the most perfect, most beautiful shape. Has no beginning, no end. It's like true perfection as a geometric representation. This is the room where you start out and you watch a little film, and then there's some presentations of different technologies, mostly all revolving around either alternating current, which of course is an invention of Nikola Tesla, and one that Thomas Edison turned down because he did not believe in the future of AC current, and also some Tesla transformers, which are really cool. I'll show you some in a minute. I think this is actually the original placard from the Niagara Falls power plant that was built by Westinghouse. And the really cool thing is you can see there are 13 patents that were listed in order to be able to make this plant, and 9 of the 13 patents were Tesla's. This is probably the coolest part. This transformer obviously is massive, and it's really cool when they fire it up. It's super loud, and then when they actually turn the transformer on, of course there's the lightning bolt at the top, but there's so much electricity that charges the atmosphere that people holding light bulbs all light up as well. Nikola Tesla, being a Serb, was a big fan of the Serbian poet Zmaj. So this is a really cool little Tesla transformer that he built specifically to share with the poet. And then there's a small museum with some of his personal effects and little inventions and things. It's cool. It's a very cool, fun, but very small museum, and I do recommend it, but I have final recommendations when I think about these museums that we've gone to. I'm surprised to say the one I would recommend for everyone no matter what is the National Museum. Even for myself, not really being an art fan or anything, it was incredible. It was, I think, by far the most enjoyable of all the museums. And I fully agree with the writers of Lonely Planet in putting a star by that one. The Yugoslav Museum, if you're interested in history and specifically the history of the state of Yugoslavia, is interesting. Personally, I don't think I would put a star on it, but I would say it's worth a couple hours of your time if that's your interest. Nikola Tesla Museum also, if you're interested in the man Nikola Tesla and his patents and work in alternating current in general, definitely an interesting museum. The demonstrations are fun, the movie is good. It is the most expensive of all of the museums. And I think I agree with the writers of Lonely Planet. I would put a star on that one. I would definitely not put a star on the Museum of Contemporary Art. To me, it was the biggest waste of time and the second most expensive of all of the museums. Unless contemporary art is like specifically your thing, I would not go to it. The last place I absolutely disagree with the writers of Lonely Planet is that they did not put a star on St. Sava Temple. That to me is one of the coolest things to see here in Belgrade. If you'd like to see what it's like, I got a video right here for you. Seriously, one of the most beautiful places I've been anywhere in Europe. I really love that church.